This is chapter number 6, Work, Life and Leisure. In 18th and 19th century, what was the life of the people, how they are working or what they are working for, and how they were living in leisure. We'll discuss all this. So the chapter is Work, Life and Leisure. The cities in the contemporary world. Contemporary means at the same time, what were the situation of the cities, different cities we'll talk about. So before I go ahead, let me give you a bit idea. What are the characteristics of a city? How do we say that some place is a city? So cities are the centers of the political power, administration network, trade, the industry, and religious institutions, intellectual activity, and support various social groups like the artisans, merchants and priests. So we have three historical processes that have shaped modern cities in decisive way. First is the rise of capitalism. So this capitalism is the main key factor of formation of the cities or shaping the modern cities. Then next one here is, these are 3 points actually. One is this one. Second is the colonial rule, or you can say the establishment of colonial rule over large parts of the world. And third is the democratic ideas, that is the development of democratic ideals. Loktantra ke vichar, democratic ideas. So let me take you to the detail. In 1880, Durgacharan Ray, he wrote a novel, and that was called The God Visits Earth, Devganer Marte Agman. So in which various gods, Brahma, the creator in the Hindu mythology, they came to Kolkata. Kolkata is today's. Previously it was called as Calcutta. They took a train, and Varuna, the reign of God, he also watches the British India. Actually, Kolkata was the capital of British India at that time. And all the gods were very amazed to see the modern city, big city. That is the train, the large ships over the river, that is Ganges. The factories, you can say the smoke coming out of the factories, the bridges, the monuments, and also the wide range of shops. They were impressed and they thought, okay, we'll build a museum when we go back to heaven. Because the city was being seen as providing opportunities like trade, commerce, education, jobs. But certain things these gods were also disturbed of, as being indicated by Ray, Mr. Durgacharan Ray. That is why they were disturbed, because the city was showing the thieves, cheats, bad guys, the poverty, the difference between the higher class and lower class, the poor quality. And also Brahma himself, he was cheated when he went to buy a pair of shoes. Everyone was accusing, I mean, shopkeepers were accusing each other. So there was a confusion, and also the caste, religious and general identities were surfaced. This is like Durgacharan Ray. Various other people also, they were amazed. You know, Durgacharan Ray wrote all these things in the novel, but others were also confused because the city was showing very contrasting, or you can say contradictory images. That is, you see a wealth also and poverty also. The splendor was also there, but the dirt, filthiness was also there. There were opportunities, no doubt, but there were missed opportunities or you can say disappointments. So these cities, we can go back 200 years to understand about all these. And as I just said, that there are three processes that articulate, that they shaped the modern cities. The first is the rise of industrial capitalism. This you have to understand, that when the capitalistic ideas came and the industries were coming into being, then the cities changed, or the city actually came into existence. Then the colonial rule, because most of the European countries, they made colonies on the other part of the you can say regions apart from their own territory. So they made colonies. And when the democratic Loktantra, that is for the people, by the people, this idea came. So this is how urbanization means making of city, or urban is somewhat related to settlements also. Settlements where people live, people work, all these are urban settlements. So we'll talk about urbanization. As I just said, what are the characteristics of the city? If we go back and understand that Ur, Nippur and Mohenjo-daro, these were the human settlements at that time, means long back. But most of these, they developed, or the cities developed on the river valleys. If I can just give you an idea, that most of the civilization, like the Indus Valley civilization, Nile civilization, and this our Sindh Ghati civilization, they developed near the rivers. At that time, the people were less, and the area or the settlements were higher, and they will produce this most if you talk about Mohenjo-daro or these areas, they were creating supplies or food supplies for other two, that is, they were producers which were not producing food, so they were producing food for these non-producers. And the cities were what? They were centers of political power, means the political regime was there, administration was done through the cities, the trade and main industries were there, also the religious institution, because religion is always there, and all the activities like intellectual activities, creating, research, all was done at these places, means the cities. And also various other groups like artisans, merchants, priests, they were being supported, they get opportunities in these cities. But cities, you cannot say that this you cannot have a very you can say candid or very clear discussion or definition of cities, because they vary. This vary depending upon the size and the complexity. That is what the main idea we understand by a metropolitan city, that is a city, a large densely populated city of a country or a state, often the capital of a region. So the population decides, the number of people decide that whether we call a city as a metropolitan or not. That is, all these things which we discuss here, they are the factors behind the cities. But if you say urban center, there are some smaller urban centers also were there. They were also providing these kind of functions, or these all functions, but limited, not that much. So as I just said, that if you have a same area, say this is in Europe and this is in some Africa, then if 100 people are living in this area and here 10 people are living, so the population density, that is the people living per unit area, is higher. And when these goes higher, then we start calling city as metropolitan, right? So what we are trying to do here is, first we'll take a certain example, like the Western world will take London. And London is why? Because this is the largest city in the world. And also in the 19th century, everyone was watching London. It was the imperial center, means queen was there, king was there. And then we'll come to our country, that is Bombay, present day Mumbai. In the Indian subcontinent, Bombay became a very important city. So then comes the industrialization and the rise of the modern England. So let me just give you a brief idea, then we go to the detail of this. That is, the early industrial cities of Britain, such as Leeds and Manchester, it attracted large number of migrants to the textile mills, which were set up in the late 18th century. 5 major types of industries or industrial establishment employed large number of people. These were clothing and footwear, wood and furniture, the engineering, metal, making of mechanical parts, the printing and stationery like printing and book binding, etc. Then the surgical instruments, the making of precious product, watches. So these were the industries. They employed large number of people. And during the First World War, London began manufacturing cars and electrical goods also. So large number of factories increased until they accounted for nearly 1/3 of all jobs in the city. Then we'll talk about the actual being what happened in this regime or this time. So industrial, as I just said, that when we talk about England has some different aspect, but certain cities, they developed as the main cities. For example, previously the England cities were mostly rural, and then came the industrial cities like Leeds and Manchester. Because of the textile mills in these areas, large number of people from the rural areas came into these areas. Now, because of the textile mills, they are called migrants. People who go from one place to another, they are called migrants in search of work or better conditions, living better conditions. Because of these textile mills being set up in late 18th century, these people came to Leeds and Manchester. That is more than 3/4. That is, if I take 175 people in 1851, which were living in Manchester, adults living in Manchester, they came from rural areas. Now let us just reduce our area. Let us come to London. In London, by 1750, in all London, 1 in every 9 people lived in England and Wales. So that is, the population was around 6,75,000, and it expanded. That is, in 70 years, from 1810 to 1880, it multifolded. That is 1 million, it became 4 million. Again, let me tell you about urbanization. It is the development of city or town. This is urbanization. And we just talked about Leeds and Manchester. People were coming because of the textile mills. But what about London? London was acting like a magnet. Everyone was coming here. Why? Because it was the city of one historian, Gareth Stedman Jones. He pointed out that this particular city was a city of all people: shopkeepers, skilled artisans, small masters, semi-skilled people, those people who work, that is labor, casual laborers, street sellers, and even the beggars. So, because of the London dockyards were developing, mostly people were getting this job also in clothing and footwear, wood and furniture, metals engineering, printing, stationery, precision products like making of surgical instruments, watches, and various precious metal objects. And after this, in the era of First World War, that is 1914 to 1918, London also created or started making the cars, electrical goods. So as I said, 1/3 of all, just mentioned that the number of large factories increased, and they accounted for nearly 1/3 of all jobs in the city. So this is the pattern being followed everywhere mostly. But here was a population rise. That is, as I said, most of the civilization, they developed near the rivers. And we call one thing as urban sprawl. That is, if these are roads, so people generally live near the roads. But if you see the pattern of development in or the population increase in London, this is river Thames, and population was concentrated here in 1784, but it increased in each and every direction, and this is the situation in 1980. So what about the marginal groups? We'll talk about everyone, like women, children, everyone. At that time, when people were coming, see, people means good guys and bad guys. That is, 20,000 criminals were also living in London, so crime was increasing, right? So everyone was thinking the philanthropists who work for others, they were also very, very concerned about this. So because people were increasing, and the law and order, in order to maintain that, the government also, or you can say whosoever was administering, they were counting the criminals at that time. Their activities were being watched, and also they were being investigated. Henry Mayhew, he also wrote in mid-19th century on the London labor. That is the crime, that is criminals. And those criminals, they were not very big criminals. There were people who were just stealing lead from roofs, or stealing food from shops, or stealing coal, or clothes which were drying. People have washed their clothes and they were just put for drying, and they were just stealing that. So they were called as deserving poor. But there were also people who were very trickster, that is hardcore criminal, you can say. They were also there. So in order to discipline all these things which are going on in the city, the authorities impose high penalties on the crime. And also for these deserving poor, that means the person who is stealing, say, food from shop, he is not actually a stealer. He just want food. So they are being considered deserving poor. And those were offered work. And women, because of the advancement of the you can say industries or setting up, women were also finding job. But and these women mostly come from the nearby areas or rural areas. After that, what happened? They were migrants actually. After that, what happened? The industries came, means mechanization work increased, and the women, they were losing their job. They lost their job, so they just give their home if they have to become as they may take some tenants or make their houses lodgers, and some tailoring activity, washing, matchbox making they would do. Then after this world war broke out, they have to come out, and then they have to work for they have to come out of the house, and they work in these areas which were producing stuff for the war. Children also were being pushed for work, for low paid worker. So Andrew Mearns, he said in the bitter cry of outcast London in 1880s, that if a child he's a thief, and he makes, say, 10 shillings and 6 pence. This is just an amount. Just understand that some amount he is making in stealing. And if he has to work, he has to do a lot of work, hard work. That is, he has to make these number of matchboxes, 56 gross of matchboxes a week, 1296 a day, 1296. So it is better to steal. For that, the government thought, and those people who were administering, they said, okay, they founded the Compulsory Elementary Education Act in 1870. Please understand, this is an important you can say year, 1870. Compulsory elementary education, that is, the child, he has to be educated. Every child has to be educated till 5th and 8th grade. And also in 1902, there was abolishing of the children or child labor in the industrial work. What is the condition of housing? See, a picture is equivalent to 1000 words. So this picture shows that the people were forced, there were too many people, and they were forced to live in charitable societies, and local authorities, they have opened out the houses, night shelters. And because London and England is quite a cold city, it is very much required, because you cannot live outside like in other countries like India. You can just come out and live below, say a bridge, but here they cannot. So this was all going on. So let me give you an idea about this, then we'll go into the detail, that is the housing. So factories or workshops did not provide housing to the migrant workers. Instead, individual landowners put up cheap and usually unsafe tenements for the new arrivals. So tenements we'll talk about. The unhygienic condition of slums highlighted the need of housing for the poor. So there were widespread fear of social disorder, especially after the Russian Revolution in 1917. Workers' mass housing schemes were planned for preventing the London poor from turning rebellious. And attempts were made for decongesting localities, creating open spaces and reducing pollution. Large blocks of apartments were also built. Rent control was introduced in Britain during the First World War for easing the impact of severe housing shortage. And between the two world wars, the responsibility for housing the working class was accepted by British government, British state. And 1 million house, most of them for single family cottages, were built by the local authorities. So these people, they were migrant, you can say. They came here to work. So housing was a concern. And most of them, they started living in tenements. And these are the tenements. They were individual landowners. They will just put up some cheap and unsafe places for people to live, tenements. As I said, that 1 million Londoners were very poor. So there was a proper survey being made by Charles Booth. And he said that the average age of people, because of the filth, because of the inhuman conditions, average age is only 29 for those people who were migrants. And as opposed to 55 age for the people who are having good class, you can say gentry or middle class. And that is how he said that 400,000 rooms are required for these poor people or poorest citizens. Then everyone thought that there has to be or there is a need for housing for these poor. And this was because they were living in such an inhuman condition, just one room houses. There were no air. There was because if you see in one room, if many people would live, then the possibility of oxygen is less, and they are not ventilated properly, and sanitation was also a problem. And then fire hazards can occur in these houses. And then there was a fear of social disorder, because so many people were living, they can really revolt for something. There were so many. That is, everyone was concerned that these people should not turn rebellious. Just if a spark will come, they will become rebellious. So this is a picture of a London slum in 1889. You see how they were living. We just talked about a word which is tenement, which is rundown and often overcrowded apartment houses, especially in poor section of a large city. And this picture shows how the work or how the basic amenities were lacking, and the people who were just selling the rat trap, he's selling rat trap because of the modernization or the industries, they were not able to sell it. Now the basic idea was to clean London. So cleaning was very much important. How did this work? Let me show you one more picture. Everyone was, because there was no place, so people have to do everything in the street. See, the kids are playing in the street. So there was a temperance movement here, and temperance movement is related to the alcoholism. That is, most of the problem people thought that it is because of alcoholism or consumption of some alcoholic drinks. So a movement to reduce this this alcoholism is temperance movement, and this actually developed to fight the evils of drinking at that time. Now there are so many people, the localities were congested, there were no open space, there are no green spaces now, and pollution was there. So in order to counter all these, there were people, because the other cities also like Berlin and New York, they were facing the same scenario. So they have to counter this situation. So there was a law, or you can say a rent control system was being imposed, because everyone was taking rent out of the box. Everyone was taking rent. There was no regulation. So this was being imposed, and because in Britain, after First World War, in order to ease the impact of people were not getting houses, so severe housing shortage was there. And then the congestion. If the congestion is there, what will people do? Mostly the wealthy residents, the people having good money, they could afford holiday home in the villages, or you can say countryside. So now the country needed lungs. Lungs means to breathe, and breathe they need oxygen. For oxygen, they need the what? They would need trees. So there was a need of green belt around London. There was an idea or a concept by Ebenezer Howard. He was an architect and planner. He gave the idea of living places full of plants and trees for the lungs, or for people to breathe properly. With this idea, Raymond Unwin and Barry Parker, they designed the garden city of New Earthswick. And these cities, see, there are main cities, and just kilometers away from those cities, there are certain cities which we call as Upnagar. And this is a picture of New Earthswick, a garden suburb. Suburb means this, what I was talking about. That is urban city, the main city, and then just outside that we have suburbs. And again, between these two world wars, from 1914 to 1919, First World War, and the Second World War from 1939 to 1945, the responsibility of housing was taken by the British government now. Million houses were made, and mostly single family cottages. But because the settlement was there, the buildings were being made, the houses were being made, now people were not able to move to or go easily to their workplace. For that, there was an utter need of the transport. So the responsibility for housing was taken over by British state, and as we just saw, that they made million houses, and most of them single family cottages. So if this is the city, and then you develop a suburb is just near the city, and you want the people to reach these places because you have made houses now. So do you need a transport service, a mass public transport service? So how was the transport in the city? We are going to discuss that. Let me give you the summary first. That is, the London Underground Railway was introduced. It partially solved the housing crisis by carrying the large masses of people to and from the city. And 10th January 1863, you have to understand this date and also the places. The first underground railway in the world opened between Paddington and Farrington. These are the streets in London. And between the two world wars, the London Tube Railway, the Tube Railway is the underground railway. It led to massive displacement of the poor people who were poor, because in order to make the railway, you need to displace the poor. And better planned suburbs and a good railway network enabled large number to live outside the central London like this and travel to work. So what I'm trying to suggest here is that transport, because it was very much required that if you want people to go for their work, you need to have something which is being provided by the government. So this was solved partially by the railway, and that was the underground railway. And the first section, see, this is only a section, not the first railway. It is a section of the underground railway that was opened in 10th January. The first section was opened in 10th January 1863 between the Paddington and Farrington Street. And if you see, 10,000 on the first very day, passengers traveled. And the trains were coming every 10 minutes. But by 1880, the passengers traveling were almost 40 million in a year. So people first they suggested, or they had problem, that is, it's like a smoking pipe because it was underground, and people felt that inside sulfur, coal, dust, foul fumes are there, and they are feeling this asphyxiation and heat. Because at that time, right now, if you see the tube railways or the underground railways or metros, then they have a proper air flowing, or you can say air conditioners are there, and there is a proper exhaust of these things. But at that time it was not there, so people were not very much into it at the first go. And more people, they named it like the iron monsters, the railways, as iron monster. This asphyxiation is suffocation due to lack of oxygen supply. So oxygen, people was feeling less. And even the famous Charles Dickens, he also wrote about that in the city, everywhere it was pits and trenches and clay. So for these, you can say, constructions of this railway, people were not very happy. And one more thing was there. In order to make 2 miles of railway, 2 miles, 1 mile is around equal to 1.6 kilometer. So for just 3.2 kilometers, 900 houses, and those houses belong to whom? For the poor. London poor were being displaced, especially between these two world wars. But even after all the criticism, this underground railway was a success. And New York, Tokyo, Chicago also, because these countries were also feeling the same heat, so they also took over to underground railway. So now we have railway, people can come there, and better planned suburbs were there, and good railway network was there. So now the connection can be there, and people, that is, the population density is less now. Population is now dispersed, as people can come from far off directly to the city using this railway. But there were some distinctions also, how the domestic and public life, they got affected, and what were the changes, significant changes for all the social groups. We'll talk about. I'll just show you a picture of cows on the street of London in 1877. Cows, dogs, sheep, etc. all were in the streets, and regular traffic blockages were there. And this is an advertisement which is urging or asking people to use or to buy the houses outside this suburb, right? So they just show that they have good houses, they have good trees, etc. So this is a London Underground advertisement for Golders Green. When we are talking about cities, then people are living, so society is there. So what are the social change in the city? So let me just give you an idea that what happened at that time. That in the industrial city, ties between household members loosened. Increasingly higher level of isolation was faced among the working class, and the institution of marriage, shadi, tended to break down. The city encouraged new spirit of individualism. Individualism means living alone type of thing among both men and women. And the public space increasingly became a male preserve, and the domestic sphere was seen as the proper place for women. In the 19th century, Chartism movement was a movement demanding the voting right for all adult males. The 10-hour movement demanded limited hours for work in the factory. And women also demanded voting rights, suffrage movement, and the right to property from 1870s. So we were talking about the social changes, and because of all this changing scenario, the ties, that is, if a family we talk about, the members of the family, the love, the affection, it was losing. That is, the marriages were breaking down. Divorce was taking place. If we go ahead and talk about the upper and middle classes in Britain, women, they faced a higher level of isolation. And women who actually worked, that is, they get salary, they have good control of their lives, and especially if you go to the lower social classes. But again, the reformers, the social reformers, they thought that the institution of marriage, the institution of family is getting broken down. And in order to, rejuvenate this, reconstruct this, it is necessary for women to be sent back home. Men, women, family in the city. So the idea of individualism, that is men, women, and the freedom, it was going on at that time. But men and women, I'll talk about the men dominance here. Men and women, they do not have these equal access to this new urban space. Because of the industrialization, women were losing job. And there are people who were Rudiwadi, conservative. They don't want women to come out. They just want women to be at their home. That is, they said that the domestic sphere or the house is better for women. But after there are certain political movements, especially for men, like the Chartism. This is for adult males only. They were asking for vote, so that we can vote. This is Chartism. And a 10-hour movement, because in factories there were no limitation of work, so 10-hour has to be fixed. This was the other movement, and this mobilized men, large number of men. So again, men dominance is showing here, but women also, they also came to political regime and movement in order to find out or want that they also need some rights like voting. And there is a word called individualism, a theory which promotes the liberty, rights, or independent action of the individual. Individual means single person. They were not talking about the community rather than the community. So the suffrage movement, as I saw, that right to property and right to vote for women, this also took place. But the things change at the wartime. Women need to come out because the men, they were actually in the war. So family again became very small. And now the family was thought as what? As a new market, heart of a new market, like goods, services and ideas. The family is thought as a idea of, it is a good, it is a service or ideas. But of course, the industrial city, they provide work for all, and when the people are working, they need break, leisure in Sunday, common holiday. So how did they find good time, or you can say fun time? This is leisure time. So at this leisure time, leisure and consumption, so various methods of recreation in this part of the world were adopted by the working class people in the 19th century already. So this included the cultural events like opera, theatre and classical music performances. And working classes met in pubs to have drink, exchange news and sometimes organizing the political action also. Libraries, art galleries, museums provided a glimpse of the British history, and by the early 20th century, cinema became the great mass entertainment for mixed audiences. So when it comes to working, it also people need break, so leisure and consumption. The wealthy Britishers which were having money, they already had annual London season. So this is a event or where they can enjoy opera, theatre and classical music performers. And around 300 to 400 big or elite family, they enjoy this in late 18th century. And what about the working class? They just go to pubs, have drink and exchange their views, ideas. Then the government thought that because government did something to provide leisure or entertainment for others like libraries, art galleries and museums. This were established in 19th century. And if you take the numbers, when they were charging the tickets, entry fees, so it was around 15,000 every year. But when they made the entry free in 1810, the number of people who were coming to museum, they jumped from 1,27,643 in 1824 to 25 to up to 8,25,901. That is, it almost shooted up in 1846. And music halls were there, people were enjoying, and cinema, these like movies, they become the great mass entertainment of mixed audiences. Then somewhere workers were also encouraged to go by the sea, enjoy the sun, because they were working in those conditions, so they were being encouraged, so just go and have fun in the beach. If I can give you the number, over 1 million British people went to seaside at Blackpool in 1883. By 1939, this has gone up to 7 million. So these are the resorts or famous London resort gardens where people generally play sports, entertain themselves and take refreshments. But the others also, like they just find their places wherever they live. So they're just dancing, enjoying. And this is a picture of a pub, you can say. That is, people come here or they take drinks and they sleep here. But when the railway took over, then most of these pubs, they went to or they were established near the railway stations. Politics in the city. So when it comes to people, when they live in a society and they are living in a proper city, urbanized city, then politics also comes into picture. So here, the London poor, they were writing, and severe winter was there in 1886, and they just want to get rid of the poverty. And after that, a similar riot, it occurred in 1887, and the previous was also was the marchers were dispersed at that time. But in 1887, the police became brutal and it brutally suppressed. And this happened in a Sunday of November 1887, and this is called as a Bloody Sunday. Bloody Sunday. Then the people here, if you see, this is a dockyard people. Dock means where the ship comes and load and unload. This is the dockyard. They are also striking or going on to strike. So London, these dock workers also went on strike. So it was a 12-day strike, and their demand was recognition of their unions. So this is how if you see large city, then it is a threat also and opportunity also. That is, you can sell so many things, advertise and sell. But if something political is going on, then there can be a problem also, right? And the rebellion of the people, if I'll just give you the idea of Paris, that when the city is being enhanced, right, it is urbanized, how things happen. So I'll just go to this picture. He is called Haussmann. He is Haussmann, and he was the person responsible for Paris. And what happened in Paris? In 1852, Louis Napoleon, he was a nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte. So he crowned himself as the emperor. So after he took over, he said that, okay, I'm going to rebuild the Paris. The chief architect was the person I just told you, Baron Haussmann. And he started reconstruction. And this reconstruction, people were evicted, because reconstruction means they need to make it again. 17 years it happened, and Paris was rebuilt. Broad avenues and boulevards. Boulevards means a road with the trees on both the sides. So people also suffered. Around 350,000 people were being displaced because of this reconstruction. And many of them, they criticize that the Haussmann guy has killed this street. He has just made a beautiful city, a happening city, into a fade city. Fade, that is a tree, a bench, a chaos. A tree, a bench, a chaos. So it was just the plan, but it was not having colors. But the Haussmann did what? He made Paris as what we see now, and it became the pride of Europe. This is the picture showing the plan of the principal streets by Baron Haussmann between these 20 years, 1850 to 1870. And he is a cartoon showing Haussmann with the compass and a set square in his hand. And he was dominating the planning and rebuilding of Paris. Coming to a city of India, that is city in colonial India, the pace of urbanization in India was slow under the colonial rule. In the early 20th century, no more than only 11% of Indians were living in cities. Population in the presidency towns, and these were the presidency town, Bombay, Bengal and Madras. So the population in the presidency towns rose considerably owing to the availability of major ports, also the warehouses, homes and offices, army camps, and the educational institution, museums and libraries. So these were the presidency states. You can say the growth was not so exponential as we see in other part of the world, especially the Western Europe. Only 11% of Indians were living in cities, and mostly in the presidency cities, as I just cited, Bombay, Bengal and Madras. And the city was providing almost everything for everyone. But Bombay was a premier city. It's an important city of India. And if you see the rise of population, it went from this number in 1872 to almost this number in 1941, right? So how this Bombay developed, let us understand this, and let me show you the previous picture first. Then you will appreciate the difference of Bombay now. This is a bustling street in Nal Bazaar. And see how many people are there. So the Bombay, it was the prime city of India. So how did it happen? Bombay was a group of 7 islands. Bombay was not like that which we see today. It was a group of 7 islands. So in 1661, the control of Bombay passed into the British hands. How? After the marriage of Britain King Charles II to the Portuguese princess. So Bombay became the principal western port of East India Company after that. At first, Bombay was the major outlet for cotton textiles from Gujarat, and it became an important administrative and industrial center of Western India. In 1819, Bombay became the capital of Bombay Presidency after the Maratha defeat in the Anglo-Maratha War. In 1854, first cotton textile mill was established in Bombay, and 1919 to 1926, women formed 23% of the mill workforce. And if we go to late 1930s, women jobs were increasingly taken over by machine and men. And with the rapid and unplanned expansion of the city, the crisis of housing and water supply became acute by mid-1950s. And more than 70% of the working people lived in thickly populated chawls of India, especially in Bombay. Chawls were multi-storied old structures. So merchant, bankers and building contractors, they owned these chawls. And each chawl was divided into one-room tenements with no private toilets. That is, public toilets they have. Lower caste were kept out of many chawls, and they often had to live in shelters made of the corrugated sheets, leaves or even bamboo poles. So town planning emerged from the fears of social revolution and the fears about the plague epidemic. So 1898, the City of Bombay Improvement Trust was established, and it focused on clearing poor homes out of the city center. So as I just said, that Bombay became the prime city of India, and how it happened, it was, as I said, island. It was just 7 islands, and Portuguese, it was in Portuguese control. Then there was a marriage between British King Charles II and Portuguese princess. This is how the Britishers got this 7 island. And then also East India Company, it quickly shifted its base from Surat now to the principal western port, that is Bombay. And this is a picture of 1852 of Mumbai, or to present day Mumbai. Here we can see these 7 islands are there. These are the 7 islands, and Bombay was the major outlet of cotton textiles from Gujarat, and raw materials like cotton and opium, this would go, or that will be exported from Bombay. So it became the major industrial center. Then how was the work in the city? As I just suggested, that after the Anglo-Maratha War, Maratha were defeated. So the Bombay became the capital of Bombay Presidency in 1819, and this changed the city. Of course, the trade of cotton and opium was going on, so mostly people were trying to settle in Bombay. And because of the textile mills also, people were migrating from the nearby areas. As I suggested, that first cotton mill, this you have to remember, first textile mill in Bombay was established in 1854. And then, that is, most of the people, they came from outside. That is Ratnagiri area. just near to Bombay. They came from there to work in Bombay mills. And 23% of workforce, the people working in mill, were women. And it just dropped because the job of women were taken over by machine and by men, of course. Then because of the railways also, this Bombay became the junction for two major railways. And there was again a lot of migration. In the area of Kutch, that is in Gujarat, because of famine, large number of people came to Bombay. And there was so much of influx in Mumbai or Bombay, and because of plague epidemic, people were coming. So in 1901, around 30,000 were sent back by the district authorities that you cannot come here. It's already, population density is so much. So when we talk about housing and neighborhoods, when we talked about Londoners or London, Bombay was a crowded city, and London, they have a space of around 155 square yards. But in Bombay, it was just 9.5 per person. This much of yards. That is, when London has an average of 8% per house, Bombay has 20% per house. 20 people are living in one house. See the number, how it changed, or it varied if you distinguish between London and Mumbai or Bombay. So Bombay, it was divided into two parts, that is a native section and a white section in 1800s. So like those people who belonged to there, they were natives, and other Europeans and Britishes, white section. So the European suburb and the industrial zone, it started developing to the north of Fort settlement area, while the suburb region and cantonment in the south. And this was very, very clear. The racial pattern was very clear in these presidency cities we talked about earlier also. This is the interior of a house built by J.N. Tata. Because of this expansion, you can say, of the city, there was a crisis of housing and water in mid-1850s. And because textile mills were booming in Bombay, this also pressurized the Bombay's housing. Like the European elite, Parsis and Muslims, the richer one, and the upper caste traders and industrialists of Bombay lived in very, sprawling, spacious, big bungalows. They were living like this. But 70% of the population, they were living in chawls. These chawls are just, you can say, multi-story structures, and natives were living there. And like we saw in London, tenements, these chawls were owned by private landlords like merchant, bankers, and contractors. They were making money from the migrants. And chawls, they have very small room, and they don't have any private toilets. That is, they have to share the toilets. Many families have to reside here, and the numbers, the census of 1901, it reported that the mass of the island population, or 80% of the total, resides in where? This one room, tenements of one room. That is, the average number of occupants in that one room is between 4 to 5. So, because of high rents, people were sharing the houses. And the environment, because, see, this is a sea coast. Bombay is a sea coast. So, the weather is very humid. Because so many people were living in these houses under filthy conditions. So, there were filthy gutters and privies and buffalo stables. So, there was not a very clean situation. They would use, because the home was small, so they would use the street for cooking, washing, and even sleeping. Then the liquor shops and the akhadas also came up. And streets were used As this is a picture of a chawl on Kalba Devi Road. This was built earlier in 20th century. You see how it is being organized here. So chawls, it was very difficult for people to live, and so many things were going on. But the problem was that the jobber would always bring those people from various villages, and and when the jobbers, because they were getting money out of it, so they were bringing people for mills, and they were living in where? The chawls. And these chawls were, even people would live in chawls or very small houses made of corrugated sheets, leaves and bamboo leaves. Same problem which happened in London. Now there is a fear in Bombay, that is the plague, the epidemic can be there. So there was a Bombay Improvement Trust. It was being established in 1898. And what they intend is to just clear these poor people out of the city. So this trust, this we were just talking about in 1918, it deprived 64,000 people of their homes. Only 14,000 were rehoused. So in 1980, a Rent Act, because rents were just unreasonable, it was passed, but it was quite opposite effect, and it created severe housing crisis. And what happened? Landlords withdrew houses from the market. So this expansion, it was a problem. It posed a problem in Bombay because land was not there. So what was the option? Option was reclamation of the land. That is how to get more land to contain all this population. So there was land reclamation in Bombay. There are certain words which have come, like akhadas, that is traditional wrestling schools, generally located in neighborhood where young people could come, they can train and for physical and moral fitness. And depressed classes, this term is used to denote those who were seen within the caste orders as lower caste or untouchables. And reclamation, and we are going to talk about this in detail, the reclaiming of marshy or submerged areas or other wasteland for human settlement, cultivation and for other use. So we were discussing about the influx of population because of various reasons in the city of Mumbai. So people, mostly the workers, they were forced to live in these conditions, like this is chawl, and Muslims and the untouchables, they were forced to live even in the bamboo leaves they used to, bamboo poles of corrugated sheets they use. So they have shelters like this. Then I suggested you that it was a trust being made. Let me show you that first. So the City of Bombay Improvement Trust, it was being established in 1898. And the focus was to get the land. And getting a land by moving out the poor. So 64,000 in 1918 people, they lost their home. Only 14,000 were rehoused. Then also there was Rent Act which was passed, and because of the unreasonable rents, and it fired back because the landlords, now they were not giving houses. To get more land, because of the scarcity of land was there in Mumbai, it was a time for the reclamation projects. So land reclamation in Mumbai or Bombay, let me tell you about this first. The need for additional commercial space in the mid-19th century led to the formulation of several government and private plans for the reclamation of more land from sea. 1864, the Back Bay Reclamation Company, it's a company name, won the right of reclaiming the western foreshore from the tip of Malabar Hill to the end of Colaba. So as population started growing in the early 19th century, every bit of available area was built over and new areas were reclaimed from the sea. So land reclamation, as I just suggested, the Bombay Governor William Hornby, he approved various projects. He approved the building of Great Sea Wall, which prevented the flooding of low-lying areas of Mumbai. And this followed by various other projects. The main idea was to reclaim the land. And the reclaiming of land, the sea area, the marshy land, all those which are available. So private companies were there. In 1864, the Back Bay Reclamation Company, this you have to remember. The Back Bay Reclamation Company, it won the right to reclaim the western foreshore from the tip of Malabar Hill to the end of the Colaba. Right? By the time this reclamation was going on, in the city of Mumbai has already expanded to about 22 square miles. And this all came from reclamation of new areas from various regions. Right? Then, I would like to highlight how this marine drive came into being. This is a very familiar landmark of Bombay. And where it is built? It is built by the land reclaimed from the sea in the 20th century. There was a project taken by Bombay Port Trust, which built a very dry dock between 1914 and 1918. The dry dock is a dock which is dry. I'm just not literally meaning it. That means the earth is excavated to build a dock which is dry, means there is no sea water there. Now this earth, excavated earth, or you can say the soil which has come up, this is used to create this 22-acre of Ballard Estate. You have to remember this. 22 acre of Ballard Estate. And this is how the famous Marine Drive of Bombay was developed. When we talk about Bombay, we talk about cinema, picture, movie, culture. So Bombay as the city of dreams, the world of cinema and culture. In 1896, Harishchandra Sakharam Bhat Wadekar, he shot a scene of a wrestling match in Mumbai Hanging Gardens, and this became India's first movie. In 1913, Dada Saheb Phalke made Raja Harishchandra. In 1925, Bombay became the film capital of India. Now, many people in the film industry were migrants from the cities like Lahore, Madras, and Calcutta. So, Bombay, as the city of dreams, it was called as Mayapuri. And what was the life of Bombay? It is being portrayed or shown in various movies and picture. Like this there is a song in CID like "Ae dil hai mushkil jeena yahan, zara hatke zara bachke ye hai Bombay meri jaan." Now this song has Bombay in it. That is, this song is talking about Bombay. There was another movie. This was CID in 1956. After that, Guest House in 1959. And there is one more song, Jiska Juta Usi Ka Sar, Dil Hai Chota Bada Shahar. That means they are talking about the people of that area, Mumbai they were talking about, and trying to show it in the type of the way that one who owns the shoe, he beats other. Jiska Juta Usi Ka Sar means his soul, his shoes on his head. That is, big people are there, but the hearts are small. So this is just it is not so important as far as examination is concerned. So the question arises, when did Bombay film industry make its first appearance? The answer is Harishchandra Sakharam Bhat Wadekar. He shot a scene of a wrestling match. There was a wrestling match in Mumbai, Hanging Gardens, and this became India's first movie in 1896. Just after that, 1913, Dada Sahab Phalke, he made Raja Harishchandra. And after that, there is no turning back for Mumbai as a film industry. If you see the numbers, that 756 million in 1947, this was the increase. If you take it to only just 50 Indian films in 1947. The film industry employed in 1987, this is way back, 5,20,000 people. And most of them were migrants from Lahore, Calcutta, Madras, and very famous personalities whose name we know, like Ismat, Chughtai, Saadat, Hassan Manto, they were associated with Hindi cinema. Here is Singapore. Now the picture shows it all. This is Singapore Marina, which is built on land reclaimed from the sea. That is, there was no land. If you don't have land, then you reclaim the sea. And this all happened with Lee Kuan Yew's his vision. And because Singapore is successful, but the history says when Lee Kuan Yew, he became the president of People's Action Party, and under his able leadership, there was a flagship program of island, because it was an island territory, and he planned everything, and then 85% of the population he gave the ownership of the houses, and this is how he was successful also. Whenever cities are made, that is urban settlement, now we call them as the city or concrete jungles. So cities and challenge of the environment, large quantities of refuse, that is the waste products, polluted air and water, while excessive noise became a feature of urban life. Black fog engulfed the towns owing to pollution, thereby causing bad temper and smoke-related illnesses. Then the Smoke Abatement Act of 1847 and 1853 did not work clean the air, as smoke was not easy to monitor or measure. So by 1840s, towns, if you talk about England, towns like Derby, Leeds, Manchester, they had laws for controlling smoke in the city. If you come to India, Calcutta, high level of pollution was a consequence of the huge pollution that depended on the dung and wood as fuel, and also the use of steam engines that ran on coal. The railway also introduced, which was line introduced in 1855, introduced a new pollutant, coal from Raniganj. In 1863, Calcutta became the first Indian city to get smoke nuisance legislature. So we were just talking about that whenever an urban settlement is done or city is being developed, then the pollution is always there. And this was just not pollution like air and water polluted, they got polluted. Apart from that, the noise also, it became the feature of urban life. England, if you go to the home and industries in 19th century, cities like Leeds, Bradford and Manchester, hundreds of chimneys were there, and people, they just are becoming black. They can't wear the clothes. Their clothes were getting dirty, and skies were grey, vegetables were black. And this picture shows it all. This is the London smog. This smog word comes from smoke and fog. So when the smoke settles down on fog, it becomes smog. So it was very difficult for them now to breathe in this air and see the road even. Why the legislation was the people tried to do that, to control the nuisance through legislation actually. But the factory owners and the steam engine owners, they don't want to spend on the technology, latest technology, or they don't want to repair or improve the machines. By 1840s, a few towns like Derby, Leeds and Manchester, they had laws to control the smoke in the city. The Smoke Abatement Act of 1847 and 1853, we are talking about these cities, as they were called, did not always work to clean the air. Coming back to India, Calcutta, it has a long history of air pollution, particularly in winter, the grey smoke, because the city was built on a marshy land. So there was a combination of this smoke or smog, or black smog. And most of the people, being poor, they were dependent on dung and wood as the fuel in daily life. Colonies, the colonial people, they wanted to do something. They were at the first intent on clearing the place of the miasmas or harmful vapor, you can say. That is, they just want to clean the air. But the railway, or you can say the coal from Raniganj, there was a railway line, and the coal coming from here gives a lot of ash. But still, many pleas were being made, and this you have to remember. In 1863, Calcutta became the first Indian city to get smoke nuisance legislation. This legislation, Calcutta became the first city. Then the inspectors of Bengal Smoke Nuisance Commission, they were doing a good job, but still the house domestic created smoke was difficult to control. So let us conclude by saying that the city always comes with good and bad things. Good is that seeking freedom, opportunities. And we went to London, we talked about England, London especially, and then we came back to India, we talked about Mumbai, how was the life, how people started living when the city was being industrialized and being urbanized. But still, the good thing and bad thing are the part of an urban culture or city culture. So this is all about this topic. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself.